Welcome to an important webinar here with the Greater New Haven Chamber of Commerce. Today, we'll be talking with Neighborhood Housing Services Executive Director Jim Paley, and this is about the 2023 Neighborhood Assistance Act, the tax credit program. And we'll also be talking about other services with this very vital group, the Neighborhood Housing Services of New Haven. So we'll be putting this together in a form where you can follow along about the Neighborhood Assistance Act as Jim Paley presents, and then we'll tell you a little bit more about some of the other services offered by the Neighborhood Housing Services. So now to learn more about the Neighborhood Assistance Act, we present and welcome in Jim Paley, Executive Director. Jim, it's great to have you here with the Greater New Haven Chamber of Commerce, and I'm sure that many of our viewers of this webinar are going to learn a lot.
Thank you so much, Ray. It's such a pleasure to be here and adapting to this virtual world, being able to present on in a virtual platform. But the main thing is to get the message across to the companies that are eligible to participate in the Neighborhood Assistance Act. I'm the Executive Director of Neighborhood Housing Services. I've been doing this for more than 43 years now. So I basically am very familiar with all of our activities and also all of the resources that we are able to bring to businesses in the Greater New Haven area. The Neighborhood Assistance Act is something that is available to all businesses to participate with if they are C Corps, and that means they're subject to the state corporate income tax. Now, I should note that LLCs and S Corps are not eligible to participate. There are a number of taxes that are offset by the by this tax credit program. But first, I'll just tell you a little bit about who we are before I get into the nuts and bolts of the program, and then we'll talk a little bit about the services that we offer. So Neighborhood Housing Services of New Haven has been in business for over 43 years. And what we do is we revitalize houses that have been derelict, abandoned, foreclosed, and make them into attractive, energy efficient, owner-occupied residences to stabilize communities, to give homeowners a vested interest, make them stakeholders in the community, and improve the quality of life in the neighborhoods that we serve. We work in basically underserved communities, neighborhoods, predominantly minority neighborhoods in the city of New Haven. But we serve people all over the area, the city, the state. We provide home buyer education to people who are outside the city and through our home ownership center. So we have a wide range of services that we offer. But you can see here is a before and after slide of just one of the 300 houses that we've done across the city over the years. The basics of the Neighborhood Assistance Act program are that corporations can donate up to $150,000 to either one or a number of different organizations. And there will be a link that will be provided to you. I'm not sure if it's active here or not, but I think that the link to all of the approved programs, which has now been made available by the State Department of Revenue Services, and you will have a choice of any organization that is on this list to make a contribution to. Of course, we're looking for people to participate with our organization, and we have two different programs. One is to help us undertake the energy conservation measures that we do in each of our houses. And then second is making energy conservation grants available to low-income homeowners who are not able to afford to undertake these on their own. And so there are two separate programs. One is offered through our two subsidiary corporations, HOC and HOC Lending, and then one is through Neighborhood Housing Services, which makes it possible for us to implement these energy conservation measures on the houses that we develop. So, and there are a lot of taxes which are eligible for, but I would imagine that most people who are viewing this presentation would be looking at the Chapter 208, the corporate business tax. And you can all check with your accountants or CFOs as to whether you are eligible or not. to take advantage of this program, but it does provide for a percentage of credit off of your taxes. And so you see in this slide, we've given an example of neighborhood housing services. You get a 100% tax credit, and the amount that we are eligible to collect under this program is $150,000. We've put in the box Music Haven, which has nothing to do with us. All of these organizations are very worthwhile organizations, worthy of support. But if you were to give to the Music Haven, for instance, you would only get a 60% tax credit rather than the 100% tax credit. And so by getting 100% tax credit, you are basically not paying anything up to the amount that you're giving us towards the credit. It's almost like giving us, writing a check to Neighborhood Housing Services of New Haven instead of writing a check to the Department of Revenue Services. You'll be getting a voucher, and that will count in lieu of the cash contribution so that you're able to defray part. And I don't believe you can defray all the taxes, but your accountants would know how much you're eligible to participate, what level, and how much you're able to give, because you do get a dollar for dollar credit. If you look at the tax credit versus the tax deduction, in Connecticut, the corporate income tax rate is 7.5%. So if you were to make a contribution to our organization, not going through the Neighborhood Assistance Act program, you would be able to deduct 7.5%. You would be able to reduce your income, your taxable income, by the amount of the contribution, and that would in effect save you 7.5% on that contribution. The tax credit, on the other hand, comes off of the bottom line. And so after you've computed your tax liability, you would subtract either 60% if you're giving to an organization that is eligible for 60%, or 100% of the amount that you're contributing from the bottom line of the taxes. So a tax credit is much more valuable to any company, any corporation subject to the Connecticut corporate income tax than simply a tax deductible contribution. And that's very important. That is the main point that we want to stress, because participating in this program is using a tax credit program rather than a tax deduction. You, of course, get a tax deduction for making a contribution to a 501c3 nonprofit organization, but it is a lot less valuable than the tax credits that are available through this program. And so that is really the importance of what we are doing here. And so the tax credits are made available between September 15th and October 2nd. The application on the Department of Revenue Services website goes live. They don't want to make this available before September 15th, because in the statute that the legislature, the state legislature, authorized this program, they specified the dates by which these, or the date range in which these contributions must be made. And they stipulated that it would be made between September 15th and October 1st. But this year, October 1st is a Sunday, so it's extended to October 2nd. And so the availability of this NAA02 form will be on the Department of Revenue Services website on September 15th. And it is a simple one-page form that requires very, very little of any participating corporation. What you need to do, of course, is ask whoever handles your tax liability as to whether or not you have the tax liability that you can defray with these contributions. That is an important factor, because we don't want anybody to have an expectation that they will be able to deduct a certain amount from their tax liability if they don't have that tax liability. Although this can be carried forward into the following year or carried back, those details will be shared with you by your accountant. or your tax attorney, whoever you use to do the taxes. And I don't expect that anyone is going to just take my word for it, but this is a program that many companies have used year after year after year to defray a portion of their tax liability. So this form will be the one that you use, that you need to sign and submit back electronically to the Department of Revenue Services, and then you will be eligible for the tax credits. Now, one thing that should be noted is that occasionally, and this hasn't happened in the last 2 years, but occasionally this program will be oversubscribed. And the legislature set aside $5 million for the program statewide, so that if the companies participating commit to making contributions that in the aggregate exceed $5 million, then the Department of Revenue Services will prorate the contributions and will get back to the participants and say, you had committed to making a $10,000 contribution. However, we were oversubscribed, and so we prorated the contributions, and you are eligible to get a tax credit for, and I'm making this number up because I have no idea how much it's going to be oversubscribed, or even if it's going to be oversubscribed. But in past years, corporations have gotten letters from the Department of Revenue Services saying, even though you committed to making a contribution of $10,000, you're only going to be eligible to take $9,500 in tax deductions and tax credit contributions. And so then the companies would only be obligated to reduce the amount that they had pledged, even though they may have pledged $10,000, reduce that amount to $9,500, and then they will know that they would get the 100% tax credit on the $9,500 because it had been prorated. So that all depends on the year. That proration has not taken place in the last 2 years, but it has taken place in previous years, so that that you would be aware of the fact that there is a limit, a statewide limit to $5 million for this program. So that's really a description of the NAA program. I wanted to just tell you a little bit about who we are and what we do, because Neighborhood Housing Services, as I said, being in operations for over 43 years, we are divided into a number of different lines of business. And we specialize in making it possible for first-time homebuyers to purchase their homes. We provide homebuyer education and counseling services, which includes financial counseling, credit counseling, and helping people get into mortgages that they can afford. We know that, and we all remember that there was a subprime lending crisis that preceded the 2008 recession. And that a lot of home buyers ended up taking out mortgages that they could not afford after the first 2 years and losing their houses in foreclosure. We don't want that to happen, and we provide the financial counseling to make it possible for people to qualify for attractive mortgages. We know that mortgage interest rates are high now. They're at a 21-year high. But hopefully they will come down as the Fed eases its policy and reduces rates. And so therefore the interest rates on mortgages will become more affordable to the first-time home buyers. But we do individual counseling with people and make it clear to them what they can afford, what they can't afford, what they should consider, what they shouldn't consider. We try to provide unbiased approaches, and our with the exception of a minor processing fee, all of these classes are free and open to the public. Anyone who wants to become a homeowner can. And then we also offer financial assistance and financial counseling to people who fall into trouble. I mean, there are a lot of things that can make it possible for people to make it difficult for people to afford their mortgage payments. There's medical disability, there's unemployment, there's a breakup of a relationship when people were counting on 2 incomes to be able to make mortgage payments, and now there's only 1 income. We help people out of financial difficulties that they may encounter due to for circumstances beyond their control. So that's the Home Ownership Center and what that does. The affordable housing development that we do, and you saw a picture of that on a previous slide. We take these abandoned houses and we transform them, doing gut rehabs, and sell them to low moderate income first-time home buyers. We don't want to saddle first-time home buyers with unanticipated expenses that they cannot afford. So for instance, even if a heating system may have 5 years left in its lifespan, we replace it. We do gut rehabilitation so that we don't expect that our buyers will have unanticipated major expenses. They'll have routine maintenance expenses, and we counsel them on how to budget for and set aside money to handle those expenses, but we don't want them to have major structural systemic events that will cost them money that they cannot afford. We also now, in the most recent years, are doing new construction because it's often easier for us to acquire vacant lots than it would be for us to get vacant buildings. People are well aware of the fact that we have in New Haven a number of what is referred to as mega landlords. They are individuals or organizations that acquire properties and are partially responsible for the rise in housing prices that we've watched and we've witnessed over the past few years. So houses are very difficult for us to acquire, but vacant lots are still fairly common, city-owned lots. And so we are building new construction, and we have 4 newly constructed houses under construction in New Hallville, and hope to be able to start additional houses in the next year. We have a community building and organizing line of business, which focuses on stabilization, giving people a vested interest in preserving the quality of life in their homes. And so I've defined, how do you define a stakeholder? Well, a stakeholder is somebody who has a vested interest in preserving the quality of life in their neighborhood. So we have 5 additive, and it's not in any particular order, characteristics of what makes a stakeholder. If you live in the neighborhood, that makes you a stakeholder. If you own property, you own your own home in a neighborhood, that gives you an extra point. If you send your kids to school in that neighborhood, that's a 3rd. If you worship in that neighborhood, that's a 4th. And then if you work in the neighborhood, that's a 5th. And the more of these additive points you touch on, and you can say, yes, I do, that measures the strength of your involvement and investment in the community in which you live. And so we look at to be able to improve perceptions of a neighborhood and being able to make the neighborhood stabilized in that way. And then we also have a community sustainability initiative that structures energy conservation. And I mentioned that's one of the things that we have going in the present time that makes it possible for contributions to support energy conservation grants for low-income homeowners to make it possible for them to be more sustainable and conserve energy, both for their own personal budgets and also for the environment. So I think I'll stop there. I've given the 15 minutes that I have to be able to describe our program, and I'll turn it back to Ray.
Jim, that's an excellent presentation, very thorough. We learned a lot. I want to mention again, September 15th through October 2nd for the neighborhood housing tax credit programs. You mentioned that little window for the application extended through Monday, October 2nd. You have here on the screen the contact information. People want to follow up. I assume New Haveners only, or is this program open to people outside of New Haven?
It's open to anybody, any company that has tax liability in the state of Connecticut, and that means that the companies outside of Connecticut can also participate and know that they're doing good in the community, making a charitable contribution that doesn't cost them anything. And so so a big company that has offices in many different states is eligible as long as they have Connecticut corporate tax liability.
Commendable. Interesting. And you see the contact information of 203-562-0598. NHS of newhaven.org. We thank you so much, Executive Director Jim Paley. We've learned a lot about this program. And of course, we'll be sharing this information with the Greater New Haven Chamber of Commerce in this webinar. Thank you so much for being our guest here today.
It's my pleasure, and people should feel free to reach out to me personally. My email address is not on there, but it's the and instead of the admin, if you just put J Paley, JPALEY at nhsofnewhaven.org, I will get your email, and we will direct it to the proper person, and you will get all the information that you need.
Neighborhood Housing Services of New Haven, Executive Director Jim Paley, thanks again for being with us here at the Greater New Haven Chamber of Commerce.
And thank you for having me.